I remember it like yesterday when Matt came down the stairs and said so casually with a smile, I booked a one-way ticket to Santiago, Chile. I thought to myself, is this real? Can we really leave our amazing careers, friends, and family? Fast forward 10 months later, after all the hard conversations, endless checklists, and heartfelt goodbyes, we were heading to the airport with one backpack each, about to set out for a multi-year adventure around the world. Filled with excitement, we had no idea what to expect, but we knew it would be a fun ride. Join us as we share what we are learning on our journey of a lifetime. This is Passport Joy Travel Talk with Nikki and Matt Javitt.
All right, thank you so much for listening today, wherever you are in the world. I am Matt Javitt alongside Nikki Javitt, and we are a couple that's been traveling full-time for 16 months now, documenting our experiences on this podcast and our website, passportjoy.com, hoping to help you have better weekend getaways or week-long vacations, or if you're planning for long-term travel, maybe we can be somebody that helps you plan for that as well. We are sitting still in Bucharest, Romania, where it's been a pretty slow week because I got over a cold, and now I think I gave it to Nikki, so you won't hear her as much as you do a normal podcast, but we're both getting over.
Give it to me.
We are both getting over the that little cold. But today we talk about Alicante, Spain, that we experienced last year about this time. And for those that are just now getting caught up on the podcast, we've been traveling for 16 months, like I said, and we started in South America for 3.5 months. And then we went to Europe, Southern Europe, for 4 months. And part of that was going from Portugal to Spain. And today's episode, we talk about our time in Spain and Alicante and how much we loved it there. And we also talk about the production of this podcast. We've had a lot of questions on, hey, Matt, how do you guys do this podcast? What's your process in that? We get into those details in another segment about the production. So check that out and get all those tips there. In case you break away before I recap in the end, please remember to sign up for our newsletter at passportjoy.com. I send out weekly highlights, and sometimes I send out other updates if something cool is going on everything that we're doing from the week prior on our travels, and then also what's coming up. It's a chance to kind of read about the highlights that you might not get from this podcast or hear elsewhere. And like I said, we're after Bucharest, we're on our way to Poland for a little while, and then Switzerland, wrap up Europe and Estonia, and then we're off to Japan. So, all right, that's it for this. Let's get on to the episode. Hola, mi amigos. We are talking about Spain, Alicante in particular. So we visited Alicante, Spain about this time last year, June of 2017. And the reason we got there is after Portugal, after about 3 weeks in Portugal, we went to Madrid to hang out with a couple of friends from the US that were there for work for the summer, staying in Madrid. So we wanted to spend about 4 days with them. And then we knew we were going to Venice, Italy in early July. And during my research, I found that Alicante had extremely cheap flights direct to Venice from Spain. And as I continued to research Alicante, I found that it was just gorgeous. It had amazing beaches, and Nikki and I love the beach life. And it had just great culture and a history. So we ended up choosing Alicante for about 2.5 weeks in June of last year. Just to backpedal a little bit on Madrid, we spent these 4 amazing days in Madrid. And I want to bring it up because it's hopefully a tip for you. So we got there and we stayed in this Airbnb. And at the time, the weather outside was about 95 degrees. It was blistering hot. And we get checked into our Airbnb, and it's already hot inside the Airbnb. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It was a shared accommodation. So our host is there with us, and she greets us. She's amazing. She's an older lady, and she gets us all squared away. And we're just like, what's up with this heat? What's going on? And she goes, well, the air conditioners broke, but it's going to be fixed in the next couple of hours. You guys can go out and have a nice day, and it'll be fixed by the time you get home. So we went out with my buddy Brent, and really enjoyed it, had a great time. I had a chance to visit with him and his wife, Lori, and the kids, and really get to see them and hang out, and stayed probably till about midnight-ish, go home, and it's still hot in the room. I mean, it is, at this point, it's even hotter than it was. So the air conditioning is not fixed. It's hotter inside than out. And at this point at night, it was like in the high 80s, but in the room, it's almost 100. So we talked to the host, and she's like, hey, so sorry, but it's going to get fixed tomorrow. So we go to bed and we try to go to sleep, and we are just sweating. We're sweating. We're laying on top of the covers. She did not have a fan in her underwear. She did not have a fan in the room. And we are just sweating like through the sheets, just glissed over through the duvet, just sweating like crazy in this room. And so after broken sleep all night, I decided when I would wake up at 7:30, 8 o'clock, whatever, I decided there's no way we're staying here because we just can't trust her word. And it's just going to be a horrible visit. So I called my buddy Brent back during our meeting. He said, dude, we have an extra room. We didn't realize that we were going to have the extra room. You guys can just stay with us if you want, because his wife and the kids were going to go away for the weekend because they had a planned vacation on the beach coast. So he invited us to stay over. And so I called him in the morning. I said, buddy, is that offer still available? He said, absolutely. And I thanked him and I said, thank you. And we went and explained to our host, there's no way we could stay here. And she understood. And we talked through it, and we got our money back and got all that squared away, and we left in a good way. And that's why I bring it up and then we packed our stuff and went over to Brent's for the next 3 days and hung out over there. The reason I brought it up is you don't have to stay in accommodations that suck. And in this case, it was an Airbnb. I trust that her opinion was right, that it was just an air conditioner that was out. But the situation was such that there was no way we could stay there. And we talked through it, worked through it, didn't have to pay the money for this day. And we had a chance to move on and make a good situation out of a very bad one because of the open communication, everything that went into it. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people might have struggled through that and just complained after the fact. Never do that. Always try to step up and make the best of the situation and kind of walk through it. Okay, so after our 3 amazing days in Madrid, and Madrid's just a fantastic city. That was our second time. Nikki and I were there. We had been there for the first time for about 36 to 48 hours. It was a short visit. And then this time was about 4 days. So we hope to go back at some point and really spend a week or two in Madrid and really take in the city because there's so much to do. And it's so much fun. And then I've never been to Barcelona as well. Nikki has. Nikki actually spent a lot of time in Spain in her teen years during a visit for high school. So she knows the country better than I do. And I just love Spain. So we took a train ride to Alicante, and we actually left a day earlier than we had planned to originally because of these bonfires of St. John, which they're celebrated somewhere between June 20th and June 24th every year. I think June 24th is the actual day. It's kind of the summer solstice, but it's also mixed with St. John. It's the birth of St. John the Baptist. So it's a big holiday in Spain, but there's these massive festivals. We heard about these festivals and we were like, well, we got to leave a day early. So we ended up leaving a day early for the festivals and to go to Alicante, which is a gorgeous little beach city. It has about 300,000 people in it on the southeast coast of Spain. It's located in Costa Blanca. Like I said, there's an international airport there, so you can get low-cost flights to other parts of Europe. Great public transportation, and the beaches are just gorgeous, very clean, gorgeous beaches with calm waves and extremely fun nightlife and a lot of good places to eat. So what we did, we rented an Airbnb about 20 minutes by bus outside of the main area where you really want to hang out. It's called El Barrio Viejo, the old town, the old city, what it means in English. But we stayed about 20 minutes outside of that, but we'd make frequent trips in because it's so amazing. It's a nice little cute area where there's narrow streets, tiny cafes, a lot of family-owned businesses and restaurants selling paella and fresh seafood from the sea because it's right on the coast. People sitting outside enjoying glasses of Spanish wine. So during the day, the neighborhood is buzzing with people walking on the streets, especially during this time. So because we were there at the end of June during these festivities, there was a lot of buzz for about that whole week. If you get a chance to go to Alicante at the end of the week or the last week of June, that's when it's really going. And they say essentially their population, I think, doubles based on these festivals. So it's not quite the festivities that we just described of Lisbon, Portugal, but it's close. I mean, because the city is so small with an influx of all these people, it gets extremely crowded. And as the night falls, you can hear the music. Like I said, we were way outside the city. You could still hear the music and the laughter and fireworks like crazy going. And then there's obviously all kinds of beers and tapas and dancing. It's kind of like a mini Madrid on the sea, if you will. It was a lot of fun. And I guess just real quick, like I said, we were staying outside of the city. So the way that we got around town was there's a tram, which is like a Metra short train system that you purchase a one multi-travel card for both the buses and the tram. And it's an easy way to jump on, jump off. You just kind of load the card up with a value. And then every time you get on, you validate it and you kind of just roll around the city real nice and easy. And that was cool because Nikki and I would do different things throughout the day. Sometimes we need to take the tram, and they've got real good apps too. There's a really good app that you pull up and you kind of put in where you want to go, and it gives you the best and the fastest and multiple different ways to get there. It integrates with Google Maps, so they know exactly the best ways to get to the different places. So we use that a bunch, and it's great because multi-person, we only needed one card for the both of us, which is really nice. A quick side note on public transportation in Europe. Not offended, but it can be irritating to see people jumping on and off public transportation without paying and without validating their ticket from time to time, because sometimes they don't. I would say a lot of times the teenagers you'll see just hopping on, hopping off different public transportation and not paying. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. We've always lived by the rule of always do the right thing. We're a tourist in their country. Even if we feel like nobody else is paying, chalk it up to being a tourist tax, and you need to pay every time and you need to validate every time. We've seen a scenario at least once, maybe twice. We've seen at least one in Budapest where a lady was apprehended or what have you, that she was questioned and grabbed. We didn't see the end result of it. She was absolutely going to get a ticket. I don't know if she's going to get arrested, but she was on the train and did not validate her ticket. And she appeared to be a traveling local, if you will. You could tell that she had lived in Budapest for at least probably 2 or 3 months. She understood the system well enough that she was trying to get over on the system. So when the officer approached her, she acted like she forgot to validate it. But we all know that she was just getting over on the system, and she was attempting to get a free ticket. So you always want to validate your ticket once you get on the trains and buses. And if you don't know what that means, essentially you're purchasing a way on and off these trains. And part of that process is they'll print out a ticket, or you have a card with you, and then you have to stick it into these little machines on the trains or the buses that kind of scan it or stamp it. Or sometimes they just time stamp it and they make a noise if it's electronic. And then that way the computer system knows if it's legit and it's used. And the officers on the buses or the trains, sometimes they're in street clothes. You don't even know they're officers. They have a device that can say whether you validate it or not. So that's why you just always want to do the right thing. Don't get upset if the locals aren't validating it, because you don't know if that maybe they are. Maybe you just don't. Yeah, maybe they have a season pass or whatever. So just always do the right thing and make sure you're doing it that way. Okay, so we go there for these massive bonfires of San Juan, and we get there just as these things are beginning. As I said, that we changed our plans to get there. And so we have dinner that night, and then these bonfires begin, and it is just chaos. As the night falls, there's parties going on, dancing and drinking and fireworks and tons of food going around. And basically a lot of local businesses are selling their own type of different foods, and the beer is flowing. The city basically turns out all the lights, and then they have these large paper mache like statues throughout the city that were put around the city during the day. And a lot of them, I think all of them had like very colorful and in different types of designs, from cartoonish to like dragons. Some of them were religious in nature, but the idea is, and some of them are animals, but the idea is they make these large statuesque paper mache type figures with the idea that they're going to be burned down later in the night, throughout the night. So, so they place them in different areas of the town, and they don't always know where they're going to be next, especially as a local traveler. You really don't know what anything's going on. You kind of just have to ask the locals, okay, where's this going on? It felt like around midnight, they started burning these big things. And as they're burning them, there's fireworks going off. All the kids are going close to it. You can feel the heat from very far away. And the local firefighters are there on site. So that's why they have to burn them in different areas, because they have to let the firefighters secure a presence around these big facades that are burning, so that it doesn't get out of hand. So that's what you have. And as the firefighters are, I guess, putting out the fire that they've just created, they're also spraying the crowd with the water. So that's when the fun gets there, and people just have a blast because they're getting sprayed with all the water, and it becomes this huge party of music and fire and water and just chaos.
Yeah, so it's actually really cool to see. So there's local people that are living in the surrounding apartments and the condos too that are trying to partake in the water throwing. And so they'll come out with buckets full of water, and the crowd will be cheering
and they'll be cheering for them to throw water on them. And so the women and the men will come out with these buckets and they'll be throwing buckets of water on everyone. And people actually want this to happen to them. It's crazy. So people will be walking around soaking wet. And then the firefighters, the same thing. So the firefighters will have just put out a fire on, the burning paper mache statue. And then once that fire is put out, people will scream and shout for them to be hosed down by the firefighters. And like, they want to be, hosed down. And so everyone is soaking wet. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's so much fun, especially as the people are getting involved. Like Nikki said, that was a big fun part of it. And I did participate in a big way. Nikki got wet as well, but I was trying to get really close to the firefighters. And there was one time when I got drenched with the firefighters as they were spraying in. There's also I'll put a show note. I think we did a Facebook live feed, and I'll put that in the show notes to kind of show what that is. But that was a blast, and it happened. We did it the first night. We did it in a big way, and then you could hear the festivities continue throughout the city throughout the week, and it was a lot of fun. It was like probably like a 4 a.m. party. It was a lot of fun. And the festivities were wild, just like the ones that we had participated in Lisbon and in Ayacucho, Peru, when we did that for Semana Santa. That was a lot of fun. But people from all over Europe come to this coastal city in Spain, not only during this festivity time, but in the summer months. And when we were talking to a lot of the locals about the increase in visitors, they talked about how Spain and this Alicante region, this southeastern region, is just really increasing with travelers over the last few years. And it goes through October. They also have a big sailing festival. There's a big, like a sailing contest that ends in October, and that's usually their big season. It starts in about May and goes through October because just the beaches are so gorgeous, and there's so much to do there. So just talking about the beaches real quick, we talked about how beautiful it is. Our favorite beach is Playa de San Juan, and it's just north of this city. It was about 20 minutes from where we were staying outside of Alicante, but it's about another 20 minutes from the Barrio Viejo, which is the best part of the city, if you will, and I'll get into in a minute. But these beach lines are just clean, pristine, gorgeous beaches. And the coolest part about it is there's a lot of walkway, and a tram that takes you to the beach is literally drops you off on the beach. So no matter where you are coming from in Alicante, if you stay in Alicante proper, or if you stayed outside like we did, when you take the tram to the beach, where it takes you 20, 25 minutes to get there, they drop you off on the beach. And the cool part is as San Juan goes further north, it becomes less and less populous. So you can decide, okay, on this particular day, am I going to mix it up and party with a lot of people on the beach and have that type of atmosphere where they're playing beach volleyball, hanging out, kicking a soccer ball around and get into the ocean that way? Or am I going to have a more quiet day like Nikki and I did several times, where you sit there with your iPod, you're one of only really few people on the beach, and you have the beach to yourself. You can take the train up as far as you want along the beach and grab it and let you off to a much more secluded area. But then as the train goes along, it also takes you to these cute little towns that are on the water. So a few times we took it up far enough that we would get off and actually hit a cafe or have lunch at one of these places, and then walk our way to a nice private area of the beach as well. So that's the really cool part, is you can get to pick and choose what type of day you're going to have based on where you're at on the beach. But they're all gorgeous, and it's a lot of fun. Getting back to the town, Barrio Viejo, which means the old city in English, it is gorgeous. It's what you would think of a typical small urban part of a European city. Narrow streets, tiny cafes, family-owned restaurants selling paella and fresh seafood because, like I said, it's right on the sea. People drinking Spanish wine outside. You might hear some music, and then during the day, it's kind of like a neighborhood buzz with people walking around the streets, shopping at the boutiques. And then as night falls, the music increases, laughter gets louder, and then the beer's flowing, tapas. There's a lot of dancing, an opportunity to see flamenco dancing, which was a highlight for me when we were there. I'd never seen it live, and Nikki had talked about it. And just the passion of these dancers. In our particular case, there was one woman that led the event. if you will, in our little restaurant area, and two men that would dance with her, and then a guy on the guitar that was playing the music. And it was just it was a lot of fun because they're really small, intimate venues that you get to really feel the entire experience, because we sat right by the stage, front row, so you get to feel the vibration of the but from the dancers' hands and the feet, just the passion in the room is palpable, and it's a lot of fun. The prices aren't expensive because they compete with other places, and plus you get like either a beer or wine with the cost of entry. But it was a lot of fun, and it's something I always remember. And that you can kind of feel the camaraderie between the dancers and the music. And in our case, one of them, the one guy got the giggles, and it was a lot of fun to see how they like kind of try to overcome with that, and they flirt because it's a real passionate, close dance. So it was a lot of fun for me to be a part of that, and it was my first time to really see that. So moving on, another big highlight was there's an island close to Alicante called Tabarca Island, and it's just a 1-hour ferry just outside of the Alicante. And here you can go sunbathing, go snorkeling. There's a lot of trails around the island you can see, and trails as far as kind of more desolate areas where there's no buildings, but there's also kind of like this cute little city and neighborhood there that you go walk through, that they've got food and they're serving stuff, trying to get the tourists to stop in. And there's even like some kind of touristy knickknacks and what's what I'm looking for, but they're just selling artisan goods that they make there on the island. So that was a lot of fun to go visit there. And there's also cliff diving. So I was nervous at first. It was one of those things where we walked by and there was a bunch of probably 15 to 18-year-olds doing cliff diving. Nikki and I kind of looked and I was like, all right, that looks awesome. I definitely want to do that. But at that time, I didn't know what all that meant, as far as, because we were probably 2 stories up, maybe 3 stories up. It wasn't too high, but it was enough to be like, I'm not sure if I should do this. So we just kept walking around the island, and the further away we got, the more I was like, hey, I need to go back and do that. So after Nikki and I walked about an hour or so, I said, I got to go back and do that cliff diving. So she gave in to my craziness, and we went back, and I stripped down into my swim trunks, and then I did some cliff diving. I put that in the show notes, and it was a blast because, and by the way, if you're doing this, the shoes I had on, I think I knew that there was cliff diving because I wore these shoes on purpose. Shoes are so critical if you cliff dive in Europe, because I've got these amazing water shoes. Were they Marmont water shoes? Because if you're putting your feet on the rocks after you jump into the water and you got to climb up the rocks, that's critical, because if you do that barefoot, it sucks. My feet are super sensitive, so I make sure I always wear my cliff diving shoes. But yeah, I had them on. I stripped down, jumped in, and I did it probably 4 or 5 different times. I did that, and it was a blast. And then by the time, so when I started doing it, I was the only one doing it. By the time I was done, there was like 6 or 7 other, I call them kids. They're probably late teenagers, maybe early 20s, doing with me as well, and that was a lot of fun. And then the island Tabarca, it's probably less than 70 people live there, and tourism is the only reason people really come out there to check out, and it's the main thing for the island. There's a bunch of small little boats.
2 hours. You can walk the whole island in a couple hours. It's really cool. It's quaint. We sat down. Matt had some fresh calamari when we were there on the island. Super cool family-owned restaurants. It's just something different to do. I mean, while you're on mainland Spain, everything's all very similar, you know? I mean, yes, there's very nice restaurants when you're in Alicante, but this is just something different. And it was cute. Like every different quarter of their island was decorated very differently too. Like one street was decorated like a musical street, and another street was decorated as a rainbow street, and so on. We have pictures on our Instagram that would depict this, but it was neat, like very private beaches that you could go to. It was very romantic, and the snorkeling was different from what you would get on the mainland. So I just suggest it. It was only like €19 to go round trip each, like the whole entire ferry ride per person. And it was just a fun little day trip, something unique.
Yeah, and they did have beaches there, but they were crowded.
And they were very rocky.
Yeah, they're the rocky. Yeah, they're the rocky beaches that you'd
find like a big, huge slab of rock to lay on, but
oh, and there's like big slabs you can lay on. But we also saw people camping out there, which we thought was pretty adventurous.
I don't know if that's allowed.
Yeah, we weren't sure how illegal it was, but the island is so big that you can find a little nook to you basically I would assume that you'd bring your stuff on a day trip and just kind of hang out there for 2 or 3 days, but you find a little nook, camp out, and then you could do a fire at night. Because we did see some fires tonight. So those are things you could look into if you're going to do it. Maybe research a little bit further if that's your thing. That's not really Nikki and I's thing to camp out. We don't have any of that gear or anything. But yeah, that island was amazing. And I think the final thing with Alicante that everybody does, and you should do, is there's a big castle on top of the Benacantil mountain that has a huge panoramic, gorgeous view at the top that's spectacular. And the entire Bay of Alicante can be seen from there. Great photo opportunities. And it's just a lot of fun. Sometimes just seeing those old castles is a lot of fun, but that's something everybody does. You just walk up there. It was a good exercise to walk up and kind of hang out. But we really enjoyed our 2.5 weeks in Alicante. People ask us all the time, what's your favorite beaches that you visited to in the world? Alicante is mine. I really like Dermi, Albania as well, but Alicante, based on the cleanliness, the ease to get there, the fact that you can get really quiet time, but also mix it up if you want to. I loved our experience in Alicante. I loved our experience in Spain in general. So that is it on Alicante.
While traveling abroad can be exciting, there are unfortunately times when we have to think about the unpleasant what-ifs that may occur that could ruin our wandering adventures around the world. Like, what if I get injured or sick abroad? What if my luggage is lost or stolen? What if my trip has to be canceled or interrupted? So prior to leaving the United States back in February of 2017, I did extensive research on many travel insurance companies online so that I could get the most comprehensive travel insurance plan that would provide the most benefits for both Matt and I. We decided to go with 7 Corners. 7 Corners offers customizable travel insurance plans to travelers all over the world. The 2 main products being travel medical plans and trip protection plans. Travel medical plans protect travelers when they get sick or injured abroad by providing medical coverage such as medical evacuations, 24-hour assistance, and medical maximums up to $5 million. Their trip protection plans protect the cost and expenses of your trip in case you have to cancel, you have a trip interruption, or delay your travels, as well as provide coverage for delayed, lost, or damaged luggage. So you can sign up today for all your travel medical plans or trip protection plans at passportjoy.com/insurance. Again, that's passportjoy.com/insurance.
All right, let's be real. Guys don't talk about underwear unless it's a problem or they're having some sort of issue. So that's why I haven't talked about mine. But since you asked, I wear Tommy John underwear. I wore it before we left, and I bought 7 pair, 1 a day. Makes sense, right? Before we hit the road full time. And I'll tell you, it was a great decision. Tommy John is a revolutionary men's underwear brand that is redefining comfort. It's the perfect underwear to keep you comfortable no matter where we travel. I wore them climbing up Machu Picchu on this crazy scooter rides of the streets of Ho Chi Minh City. And when I was playing hoops with those kids in Kerala, India, they never rode up because they have the innovative design and proprietary fabrics to make sure that the legs never ride up, the waistband never rolls down, and you never get a wedgie because everybody's worried about that. And their horizontal quick draw fly has been described as life-changing. It is, I promise you, because of the crazy situations we have on the road with the toilets sometimes we see. It is a game changer. Plus, all the Tommy John underwear is backed by best pair you'll ever wear, or it's free guarantee. So if you don't love them, you can get your money back from Tommy John. But I've never had that problem. Like I said, I had a ton before I left, and I bought 7 pair before I hit the road. So go to passportjoy.com/Tommy. Again, passportjoy.com/Tommy to find their latest styles and great deals. If you want the best underwear you can have, whether at home or traveling, any time of the day. All right, I'm going to answer, I guess it's feedback and questions I've gotten from mostly my buddies that are saying, hey, dude, this podcast thing, how'd you start it? What made you want to do it? How you doing it? The production aspect of it. How does it, I've been getting a lot of positive feedback on the production quality. How do we do that? So I'm just going to run through this a little bit and give as much feedback as possible, just in case there's people out there that are thinking about doing their own podcast, just to give some insight on how we're doing it. And maybe that'll make it easier for you to get over any hurdles that you might have mentally or what things you're thinking about buying. So, all right. So before we left, it was always a goal of mine to do a podcast. I thought that getting an audio documentation of our journey would be a lot of fun, just to be able to save it for whether when Nikki and I get 20, 25 years from now, to be able to just kind of reach back and listen to these files and I guess replay these memories for ourselves is going to be amazing. But also for our nephews and nieces, give them a chance when they get old enough to really comprehend what we're doing, give them a chance to go through and hear them as well. So that was the premise of why I wanted to do it at first. And then as we were traveling, we did have a few people say, hey, you guys should do a podcast. So before we left, I had already packed a microphone. I did all the research up front before we left to understand what would be needed. And it's pretty minimal, to be honest with you. So I decided to pack a microphone. Yeah, we only have the 46-liter bag and everything's super tight because I've got big shoes and big clothes. So it was there's already not a lot of space in the bag, but I knew the microphone would be important. So I packed a microphone. The one that I chose was the Audio Technica ATR 2100 with the USB attachment. Based on my research, this was the best that we could select for the podcast and price point. It's not that expensive. It's between, I think, $60 and $80. It fluctuates, I think, based on supply and demand, but that's the one I got. Now I'll have a link in the show notes for that. And it's been great. It's worked really well. So I carried the mic in our bag for a year. And then finally, after conversations and really just getting the courage to do it and also getting a flow of travel, because early on, I mean, travel gets so hectic that at a point, Nikki and I got better at it. We were better at traveling. We had more of a pattern, more of a flow of what we were doing. So then we could incorporate other things. We had side creative projects as we've been going along on different stuff that we're working on, but doing a podcast would be overwhelming because it is a lot of work for those that know it. There's a lot that goes into it. So we got to a point where we were going to pause in South Africa. We're going to be in South Africa for 3 months. So we had a chance to kind of slow down and I guess get things in order for the podcast. And that's what we did. We took about 6 to 8 weeks and we really buckled down and focused in on the workflow, the process, choosing the music. We got the introduction down, understanding what we wanted to talk about at the beginning and building out some of the ads that you hear, those types of things. We got all that in a proper flow and order. So as we left South Africa and began our more travel jumping around the world, then it would become easier to do. So had the microphone, and then there's, as far as the recording of the sessions aspect, I found the free software called Audacity. It's downloadable, easily used, and there's a lot of tutorials out there that makes it real easy to use Audacity. So that's what we use to record. So essentially plug the mic in, record with Audacity, and from there you have a file. And I grab that file, save it on my laptop, and then I upload it into Dropbox. I've talked about Dropbox before on the podcast. It's a great technology for sharing, whether it's documents, spreadsheets, files, photos. We use Dropbox for a lot of different things, but I put the document into Dropbox, and then this is the magic. We have a team in the Philippines. I work with a guy named Dave. He's amazing. His team is called Podcast Engineers. You can find them at podcastengineers.com, and they do the production of the episode. So as Nikki and I put the different segments that we talk about in each episode, we put those into the cloud. Dave and his team get those episodes and brush them up, make all the music transitions, do all that so we can have one beautiful final piece of a file that then gets uploaded into a web service called Libsyn, Libsyn. Now, Libsyn is great because there's all kinds of different podcast tools out there, different podcast websites. So if you had to send out each publication to the different websites, it can be very, very time consuming. And I knew as we were leaving, I knew that as we were doing this, that in order for us to be consistent and make sure that we do it every single week, it was going to have to be as easy as possible. It's not easy to do, but I was trying to make it easy as possible. So that was the plan, to be able to upload these files into Dropbox and make it easy for a team that's talented in this regard with sound production for them to get it, crystallize it in a way, and then have that completed file and put it into this service called Libsyn that I'd read about, researched about, and understood that this was the best tool for us. And Dave and his team at Podcast Engineers agreed that Libsyn is the best. And then when you put it into Libsyn, they spit it out to all the different podcast outlets to make it easily consumable on any device and any podcast app that you might use. So that is our workflow as we do all this. So typically, Nikki and I will discuss each week's topic that we want to talk about. We'll build out our notes, go through that process, which was usually 2 to 3 hours or so on our own. And then we come together, kind of share our notes, talk about it. And then we do the different segments, the different interview segments for the podcast. And then I'll do the overview and outro segments. And then I'll build out the show notes with all the links and information that I think is relevant to each of the episodes to make it easily clickable for the users. And then I share those notes on Google Drive with Dave and his team. Dave takes those show notes and then he puts all that also into Libsyn. And then with the show notes, the file, and a few other tag words and keywords, the things that Dave and I have discussed over the months, it puts all that into the account. And then each segment gets kicked out on Thursday. I guess it's Thursday midnight Eastern Standard Time is when each episode goes live. And that's the process. And that's basically it. So podcasts can be as cheap, almost free as you want to do it, depending upon how you want to scale it down. Obviously, me working with the team at Podcast Engineers was important to me based on how much time we had on the road. So I needed to minimize that. You don't need that element. I highly suggest those guys to make it so easy. But because of our travel schedule and lack of consistent internet, I knew it was necessary to use those teams, because if I was going to attempt to upload our podcast and get it out to all the different usage sites, it would be impossible. But these guys make it super easy. So I'm happy we did that. Without it, I don't think we could do it week by week. And for me, that was the most important thing, is being consistent. It's almost like anything in life. If you're not consistent with it and it doesn't become a pattern, then it's so easy just not to do it. And then you don't do it for a week, you don't do it for 2 weeks, next thing you know, it's a month, and then it's not consistent and you just kind of go away. And I think that's a lot of the things that I've read coming up to us doing the podcast was consistency and persistency is the key. And it's real easy to fall off and stop doing it. And when you look out at a lot of other podcasts out there that haven't been consistent, they typically fall off. So, and then Libsyn, I'll put a link in the show notes there, is very important because their service ships the episodes for you instead of you have to do everything individually. If you have any questions on this, I'm very happy to talk about it. I enjoy this. I've enjoyed the process. I always like learning new things. If there's something in there that you're saying, Matt, you're missing out on, you need to be doing this as well, feel free to shoot those over. But that is our basic process on how we do each show. And that is it for this episode. Thank you so much again for listening. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. This really helps Nikki and I get in front of new travel listeners that might not be aware of our story. And as also a thank you so much for leaving great reviews, like this one left on Apple Podcast from Natalie. Ever wonder what it would be like to quit your day job and travel the world? Matt and Nikki Javid are actually doing it. Listen up for details and advice they've learned on their world adventure. Entertaining, informative, enlightening, and inspiring. Thank you so much, Natalie, for those kind words. We really like hearing that feedback, and we appreciate you taking the time to write it. Thank you so much. As always, I list out all the important links that we talked about today in today's show notes. So all this stuff that I talked about with the podcast, the different software I'm using, the microphone I use, and all the links from Alicante, all that is included at the podcast tab at passportjoy.com under the episode listing. You can also follow along with our travel updates in our weekly newsletter, also found at passportjoy.com. Just sign up for the newsletter there, put your email address in, and I'll send you out those emails every Thursday morning. On the website, you'll find our blog posts, travel tips and tools, and our social media links as well. We will be back next week to talk about workaways, as well as our time here in Europe. Until then, safe travels to wherever you might be heading next, and I hope you're having a blast as you do it. Thank you.